Like many Sega fans growing up in the 90s, I was one of those guys who bit the bullet and bought a Saturn. And like so many others, I of course ended up picking up a copy of Panzer Dragoon. While I enjoyed the game for its design and gameplay, it never really kept my attention back in the day. Maybe it was the limited continues or the lack of a save function during missions, but it never really stuck. Panzer Dragoon's why, now that was an entirely different story. I can still remember rubbing the game in my friend's face and telling him how much better than his beloved Star Fox it was. The music kept me in the action, my dragon had more abilities, and I didn't have to start the whole game over after dying like 2 times. And the story. This was when the world of Panzer Dragoon really grabbed my attention. Unfortunately, I wasn't one of those lucky few who managed to snag up a copy of Saga at its release. I never had a chance to play the game until later on in the mid-aughts, and maybe that's why I personally don't hold it to the same high standard as others. Now don't get me wrong, it was and still is an amazing game, and it did a phenomenal job of expanding upon an already rich world, but the gameplay never really felt like Panzer Dragoon to me personally. Now honestly, my favorite game in the series didn't even exist in the 90s, and with its recent addition to the Xbox One's backwards compatibility list, I felt it no better a time than now to go back and to see exactly what the game offered both series newcomers and fans alike. Welcome to the channel, I'm the Southern Sega Gentleman, and this is a look back at Panzer Dragoon Orta. Orta was one of Sega's first titles released after their departure from the console market that wasn't a holdover from the Dreamcast. The design of the game was placed in the hands of Smilebit, which consisted of a number of the original Team Andromeda members behind the first 3 main entries in the franchise. Released in late 2002 for Japan and followed shortly by a worldwide release, the game would eventually see over 250,000 units sold over its lifetime. Now that doesn't make it the best-selling Panzer Dragoon game ever, but that does mean there's still plenty of copies left in the wild to find. Orta's story picks up several decades after the events of Saga and follows the title's namesake, a young girl who's been locked away all her life in a tower sitting center of a hidden human settlement. In traditional Panzer Dragoon fashion, we aren't kept waiting too long before the action gets started, as we're treated to a newly revived empire launching a surprise attack on the settlement. It's made clear pretty quick that you're in fact their target, as 3 dragon mares quickly tear down the walls of the tower that once surrounded you. It's at this moment that a legendary dragon comes to your aid, and with that you'll be thrust directly into combat. From this point on, you'll be given in-game cutscenes that expand upon your limited knowledge of this new world, with epilogue-style intermissions between chapters. See, Orta takes you on a journey, much like its predecessors. With no knowledge of your past, Orta will chase down every clue she can, and this is where your main antagonist, Abad, comes in. This drone, the most advanced creation the ancients ever produced, knows who you are and has some sort of plan in store for you. This dynamic between Orta and Abad is your driving force behind progressing through the game. Now while I would love nothing more than to make this a lore episode, I don't want to spoil the game for series newcomers. So if you'd like to see me cover some of the storyline in a future video, post it down in the comments section and I'll see what I can do. Needless to say, the game does a fine job of expanding upon an already rich in-game universe and kept me pressing on just so that I could learn more. The game itself is a direct continuation of what made the first 2 games so enjoyable, on-rail shooting coupled with action coming at you from every direction. Missions are broke up into 2 separate parts, a pre-boss grind, then a boss fight set along a looping map. Similar to Zwei's multiple paths, most chapters give you the option of choosing how you get to the boss. You probably won't even notice that this option exists until the score screen pops up, but go ahead and replay those chapters a few times and you'll be surprised just how many paths some of them hold. Another improvement to gameplay is the checkpoint system, which will give you the option to restart at the boss fight if you make it that far. Tough luck if you get knocked out right before it though. Very similar to Saga, Orta utilizes a morphing mechanic for your dragon, allowing you the ability to pick how you fight from 3 different forms. The base wing, which is what most fans of the first 2 games will be accustomed to, consists of a volley of lock-on lasers and allows for the character to move forward and backward. Your heavy wing will see your movement speed and range hampered in favor of a few powerful lock-on lasers. And finally your glide wing, the most agile of the many forms, great against a wave of incoming missiles, but not the best choice for taking on more powerful foes. Now what really makes this whole morphing mechanic so interesting is how the game forces you into positions where you'll have to swap out between them in quick, almost frantic succession. 1 second you'll be down in waves of Imperial flyers, to next being faced by a slew of rockets, then right back to a stronger enemy. It most certainly keeps you on your toes and can be quite frustrating in later chapters, but just stick with it. The last major change I want to mention is the glide and berserk mechanic. Each form will have a glide gauge associated with it. This is most often utilized during boss battles to position yourself to attack certain weak points and to dodge attacks. Learn it, or you'll be seeing that game over screen quite often. Your Berserk attack also has its own gauge for your 3 forms, and figuring out which form's Berserk is best for a certain situation will basically come down to trial and error. Now in the appearance sector, this is Panzer Dragoon Evolved. The step up in hardware courtesy of the Xbox shines in every aspect of the game, whether it be the beautifully rendered cutscenes that really flesh out the look of the game's dystopian future, or gameplay where your eyes will be attacked on a regular basis with a myriad of colors, several varied landscapes, and a multitude of enemy types. I'll always enjoy the look and feel of the first 3 games on the Saturn, but this was a step beyond what I could imagine. Just take for instance Chapter 7, where you're teleported from one realm to the next, each one with its own stylized appearance. It honestly looks and feels something right out of Res. Then of course there's the music. The Panzer Dragoon series has always been known for its amazing orchestral soundtracks. The heavy blast of trumpets echoed by melodic violin strings produced an amazing and larger-than-life vibe while you flew and dashed across the game's 10 chapters. This is by far my favorite soundtrack of the series, and I found myself listening to it while editing countless times. One gripe that I've heard repeatedly about Orta is that the game has an insane level of difficulty. Their words, not mine. While yes, the game does have quite the steep learning curve, this is one of the instances where taking the easy path first is best. Orta gives the player a number of advantages when it comes to its checkpoint system and quite a large health bar, but it also throws a very fast-paced playstyle at you much of the time. There's absolutely no shame in tackling the game on easy a few times so that you can get a handle on everything new. That being said, only by pushing on to the harder difficulties will you be able to really get the full worth of the game. Pandora's box, and it alone is worth the price of admission for fans of the series. Once you've finally beaten the final boss and the credits have rolled, you'll be granted access to this treasure trove of information about the world and its many characters. Encyclopedia's worth of background story, full character bios for the entire series, and even full descriptions of the many enemies you will have faced. You'll also gain access to a number of new levels and stories to enjoy. These include side adventures which tie in loosely with the main story, and a side story of sorts involving a young Imperial board by the name of Iva. The later missions are a welcome change as they bring a more human feel to the Empire that you have faced throughout the series. Unlocking all the many secrets that Pandora's box holds takes time more than anything, and generally speaking, putting in 20 hours of actual game time will unlock every extra in the game. There are a number of full walkthroughs on the net if you're only after a few select secrets, however. Now don't think I've forgotten about the jewel hidden away in this game. Yes, by merely obtaining 5 hours of gameplay or beating the game on any difficulty, you'll be granted access to the PC port of the original Panzer Dragoon. Personally, I would have rather it been Zwei, but it's still an awesome addition to an otherwise already pretty bonus-packed game. Seeing as not everyone will have an OG Xbox laying around, I figured this the opportune time to discuss all the many ways you can play Orta. Obviously an Xbox would work, or at least that's what you may be thinking. For consoles produced before the 1.6 hardware revision, you're good to go, and you'll be happy to know that your console will dish out crisp 480p resolution the whole time. If your units of 1.6 are after, then you'll be stuck with not so pretty 480i standard definition. That is, if your console will even boot the game up. Some members of the community have stated that swapping out your original drive for an Hitachi drive can resolve the issue, but I can't confirm that firsthand. Now for the 360. Like many OG Xbox titles, Orta is in fact backwards compatible in all regions. The 360's emulation treats the game quite nicely, and it's in fact the footage you've seen for this entire video. 2 points to make though. 1. Most PAL consoles will have freezing issues after the 3rd chapter, and 2. North American units can suffer from graphical glitches in some of the later parts of the game, most notably Chapter 7. Finally, there's the Xbox One. The base model as well as the Xbox One S will upscale the game to a resolution of 960p, with the Xbox One pumping out a resolution of 1920p. One last note for current gen Xbox owners is that the Orta is also available on the Xbox Marketplace, and at the time of this recording it was being sold for $9.99 USD. With all that said, Panzer Dragoon Orta serves as a testament to what Sega was capable of even after leaving the console market. The love this entry showed to the series as a whole, and the fans who had stuck with it since 1995, was awe-inspiring for me back in 2003 just as much as it is now. Yes, the game has its flaws, but I dare anyone to find me a game that doesn't. While many fans were probably disappointed by the lack of an RPG sequel to Saga, I personally feel that the move back to a rail shooter has easily stood the test of time. So will this game be for everyone? Most certainly not, especially considering the steep learning curve and difficulty the game presents, but I believe series fans and many newcomers alike will find plenty of enjoyment in this treasure of the 6th generation. Hey, if you enjoyed the video and you'd like to see more from me, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you haven't already, hit the bell right beside it, that way you stay notified every time I drop a new video. As always, this is the SSG, signing out.